pretending to take that ivermectin is dangerous or claiming that it's horse medicine, would you not agree that that's the exact definition of misinformation?
I would not agree with that. There are very well done randomized trials showing no benefit of ivermectin.
And you knew that in 2021?
I was not at the FDA.
No, you didn't know that in 2021. Has ivermectin been successfully used in medical treatments?
Successfully used for worms, but no effective treatment for
It's been administered
ivermectin.
in humans billions of times over the last, what, 30 years? Correct?
Again, for the treatment of worms.
Dr. Califf, let me ask this. What do you think that that tweets like this garner credibility to an organization like the FDA? Do you think that snarky tweets that I would think that my teenage daughters might write, do you think that that garners credibility with the FDA and the American people?
I can't really comment on that. And again, I wasn't at the FDA when that tweet was put out.
I don't know how long you were asked about ivermectin. And let me tell you something. I don't know if you've ever testified in court, but you will be a great witness because you refused to answer the way that he wanted you to, which would have been, again, putting out misinformation.
During that time, under the guise of COVID, Congress appropriated billions, $189 billion to the ESSER fund to restore educational services after COVID-19. Of course, like everything else, the government throws taxpayer dollars at. The money was often used inappropriately. While there were some school districts that appropriately spent the funds, there were many, and unfortunately far too many, that used it for nonsense like DEI programs, critical race theory, gender ideology, and other work programming.
I just want to be clear. I'm going to go to the end real quick because I know that that was brought up. Critical race theory, is that typically taught K through 12, yes or no?
No.
Okay, all right. So we can stop with the nonsense because K through 12 was not teaching critical race theory, at least in this country. I can't talk about what happens in other countries, but in our country, K through 12 is not learning critical race theory, just for those that are unfamiliar.
Secretary Buttigieg, you have recently, just earlier today, you've answered a lot of questions related to the slow implementation of the EV charging stations, and one of the conversations that you had, I thought was concerning, and I want to kind of touch upon it, was the statement that this push towards electric vehicles, even though there's a cost of slave labor, and that we're seeing, and it's not just cobalt. We've got lithium and other items that are being supplied by 90% of it is coming from China. So we're empowering someone who's an aggressor to the United States, and yet you're saying that it's fine so long as we're saving lives in America.
That's not an accurate characterization of what I've said. We wish you would have supported us in moving more of this onshore so it'd be produced in America, but the legislation did pass, and to take graphite alone, we're going to be able to supply, we estimate, 47% of it domestically. Nobody believes in allowing any product that doesn't meet labor standards to be imported to the United States, and if you'd like to work with us on making sure any of the 159 items of concern to include cobalt can be better enforced, we'd welcome that.
Your view that it saves lives.
We believe that preventing harmful pollution, well, we don't believe, it is a fact that preventing harmful pollution in the U.S. will save lives.
Have you done any calculations, given the current rate of fires that occur, and these fires, as reports indicate, take hundreds of thousands of liters of water to extinguish when an electric vehicle catches fire? Do you have any research that indicates how many people might die from some of these fires?
I haven't seen a projection of that. I'm sure you're aware that flammable liquids are also a safety concern, and either way, we work to make sure that they are handled in a safe fashion.
We're not seeing the reports of vehicles, like an epidemic of regular gasoline vehicles catching fire.
You're not? You've never heard of gasoline fires in vehicles?
150,000 liters of water to put out?
Are you familiar with what happened to the I-95 bridge? Let me assure you that the use of flammable liquids to propel hundreds of millions of vehicles includes hazards. Let me also make you aware that the American Chemical Society estimates that 9,700 Americans a year die from the pollution associated with passenger vehicle use in this country.
Let me ask this question. There's been reports of individuals who have been locked in an electric vehicle. There was a recent story. Renee Sanchez found her 20-month-old granddaughter stuck in an electric vehicle in the heat. The battery had died, and they couldn't get the child out. They had to call and get firefighters to come break the glass in order to get the child out. Just recently, last year, Secretary Granholm had an embarrassing incident where she had a PR tour that went south, was promoting electric vehicles and that push, driving across the country in electric vehicles. Apparently, she had an advance team that was in a gas-powered vehicle. That advance team occupied the charging station, the one charging station that a family needed, causing who had an infant, that family to have to call 911 so that they could make sure that they were able to provide some kind of care for their infant child in that heat.
I imagine you're aware that the number of publicly available chargers has nearly doubled since we took office, and we're investing to fill in the gaps. Now, 80% plus of charging happens at home, but for the rest of it, that's where those public chargers are so important. But we've just never been the kind of country that holds on to old technology because we're working on problems with the new technology.
You see my point? The American people are seeing what's happening, and they have serious concerns, and yet we're pushing ever more in this direction. And I don't know that we're actually taking into consideration the human costs that these are also bringing with them. The potential for batteries to die, people to be stranded in places without air conditioning, without support. And I would think that your administration would want to have those facts as well. How many people might die because of fires occurring from these batteries?
A battery dying is a problem, just like running out of gas is a problem, which is why we're investing in addressing that. I've just never thought of that as an excuse to hang on to dirty and expensive fuels and old technology.
Well, the American people disagree. They do.
Well, no, the American people disagree with you because every year they buy more EVs.
No,
why do you think they're buying more EVs every year than before?
Because present the numbers, because every...
Sure, 1.2 million vehicles were purchased last year, and every single
how many
quarter...
of them were government?
How's that?
How many of them were purchased by the government?
Approximately 0.5%.
Of the number, you're saying...
Of the EVs, about 0.5% were purchased by the federal government.
The only reason why people are buying them is because of the subsidy.
Well, the subsidy makes them more affordable and helps people buy them. That's true.
Thank you. My time has expired.
I'd like to draw your attention to a tweet that I know that you're familiar with. On the post forward, it says, "You're not a horse. You're not a cow. Seriously, y'all, stop it." Another sarcastic tweet from the FDA read, "Hold your horses, y'all. Ivermectin may be trending, but it isn't authorized or approved to treat COVID-19. The FDA put out these messages in 2021 and made similar posts on the other platforms to discourage people from using ivermectin to prevent or treat COVID. In January 2022, the FDA was sued by a number of doctors who claimed that you were practicing medicine as an organization. As part of that settlement, you were forced to delete these. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, in fact, the U.S. Court of Appeals said the FDA is not a physician, and even tweet-sized doses of personalized medical advice are beyond your statutory authority. Is that correct?
That's what the court said.
I'm glad that the courts told you to remove these tweets because it is snarky. I think it's demeaning to the American people and certainly demeaning to people, I believe, in my district.
Now, Chair recognizes Ms. Crockett from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Dr. Califf, thank you so much for being here. You know, you are a brave man. I don't know who would want to sign up for your job, especially in a time in which it seems like we don't believe in science, or we don't know what data is, or we just gonna ignore it. I'm not really sure. I do want to do a quick level set on something, and I don't know how we continue to come back to this, but let me just ask you a few questions. Was COVID-19 real?
Yes, I had it myself twice. I think twice, once or twice.
Did people die?
Just in the U.S. alone, over 1 million people. It was in the top 3 causes of death for many months. And I had friends, you know, I was an intensive care unit doctor. When I came to FDA, I stopped practicing, but my friends in ICUs were overwhelmed. Hospitals had to have trucks backing up to the hospital because there wasn't enough room for all the dead people.
And did vaccines save lives?
Yes, thank you for asking that again. People that are up to date on their vaccines have a significantly lower risk of being dead or admitted to an intensive care unit compared to those who are not up to date on the vaccine. And the worst of all are people not vaccinated at all. That's true on the individual level. If you look at counties in the U.S., the counties with a higher vaccination rate have lower death rates from COVID. If you look at countries, you see the same general relationship. So the vaccines have been highly effective.
Thank you so much for
Not
that.
perfect, but highly effective.
I understand. I don't know that there is any perfection. I know that there's none in this chamber. Nevertheless, as a result of an administration that believes in science and data, we now have ARPA-H, which ARPA stands for Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health. And my district, luckily, was the recipient of an ARPA-H customer service customer experience centers. And I'm so excited because this means that as we are looking at trials, as we're looking at diversifying them, we will have a great opportunity right there in Texas 30. It is a huge investment in science to make sure that we can save lives. And when the next pandemic arrives, we will actually be prepared and have science so that we can stay on top of this. Because the last time I checked, and doctor, correct me if I'm wrong, having a leader suggest that we should inject bleach. Are you aware of anyone being cured of COVID-19 because they injected bleach into their body?
I am unaware of any such thing. If I might comment in general, and this relates back to the discussion about ivermectin. I came along when heart attacks, no one knew what caused a heart attack. That was what I focused on. We tried 100 different things for the treatment of heart attack. Only a couple of them worked, the others didn't. And the only reason we knew what worked is we went from the idea to doing a well-conducted study, a randomized trial. And then, if it worked, then all the practitioners began to adopt it and use it. So we now treat heart attacks by going to the cath lab, opening the artery, and some medicines that work. Ivermectin has been studied multiple times in randomized trials, no benefit. But it is highly effective for the treatment. I use the word worms as a generic term for the kinds of infections that typically occur in places like Asia that can be devastating. It got a Nobel Prize because it's effective for those, and it's been a lifesaver, but it's been ineffective in COVID.
I completely understand. The last area that I'm going to touch on in my last 45 seconds, because I am a woman out of the state of Texas, there is no way that I am going to have a conversation and not talk about reproductive access. So out of curiosity, would you consider the medical management of a miscarriage to be potentially a life-saving usage? Yes or no?
I have to decline to answer that because
that is
it's
perfectly
under
fine.
adjudication by the Supreme Court.
That is perfectly fine. I'm gonna tell you yes, but I'm gonna give you another question that you can answer. Would you consider erectile dysfunction as a life-saving usage for Viagra?
Not life-saving.
Not life-saving. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you that based on my research, that mifepristone actually has life-saving characteristics, yet Viagra doesn't. And for those that don't know, Viagra, from my understanding, is actually nearly 10 times greater as it relates to risk of death. Yet for some reason, it's not sitting in the court right now. And I do appreciate the fact that you laid out that when it comes down to getting drugs approved, they actually go through trials. It's not just randomness. You take the randomness, you then say, maybe there's some evidence here, and then you put it through the ringer. After putting it through the ringer for decades, women's lives have been saved. And as a representative from the area that Roe v. Wade actually initiated, I am appalled because for whatever reason, some people want us to go back to horse and buggy in this country. And I think since now maybe we have the internet, maybe we should take advantage of it. And we shouldn't say that we should remain in the times of horse and buggy. And so with that, thank you for the work that the FDA does. I respect your research. I recognize that the courts don't do research. I also recognize that this chamber seemingly doesn't care about research. But because of the work that you do, there are lives that are being saved, and I need you to be funded to the fullest extent to make sure that we can continue to save American lives. Thank you. In addition to that, we just heard about AFT and what they're advocating for. And I know that there was a comment that you made as relates to discipline and how that's something AFT should be advocating for so that teachers can be safer. Is that correct? Am I characterizing what you said correctly?
I believe that both the NEA and the AFT should endorse policies that keep educators safe. Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you a quick question. Actually, I would like for all three of you to answer this question. It's just a yes or no. We'll start at this end. When you were growing up and going through school, did you ever have to go through an active shooter drill? Yes or no?
No.
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 Oh, okay. All right. So can we agree that guns being kept out of schools may be one of those things that could keep not only teachers safe, but also students safe? Yes or no?
Yes.
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 Okay, thank you. So I do want to touch on a few things that Ms. Ocasio-Cortez talked about because I don't really know the breadth of your understanding or experiences, but to give a little clarity to the district that I come from, 20% of my district live at or below poverty. And I do come from an urban district. I do have a majority minority district. I know that we've talked about DEI and diversity. And I find that when I'm here, I am constantly fighting to make sure that I can break through the noise and the stereotypes that exist around not only my kiddos in my district, but just my constituents. And one of the things that maybe some of you have never experienced, I don't know, is the fact that one of the leading reasons that students in my district don't show up to school is because they are poor, because some of them are homeless. We found that there were children that didn't go to school because they didn't have clean clothes. That is something that certain people don't have to worry about. And they found that if they brought in washing machines so that kids wouldn't make fun of them because they had clean clothes, that they would show up. These are things that maybe in a more affluent district, they may not need money for. So while one of my colleagues talked about how much investment has to go into some of these school districts in the inner city, I do want to make it clear that there are different obstacles that my kiddos deal with. In addition to the fact that I practice criminal defense work prior to coming into the legislative realm. And in my district, I have the highest incarcerated zip codes in the entire state. What that means is that sometimes I have children that go home and they don't have parents to go home to. Or if they are going home to parents, their parents may be involved in things that aren't necessarily the best things for kids to be around. And so, as it's already been stated, sometimes the safest space is at school for some of these children. And what is so annoying to me is that we debate whether or not we will invest in our futures. As far as I'm concerned, there is no better investment than in our children. Because if we are going to make sure that this country continues on, it's not going to start by investing in people that look like me or of my age. It starts with making sure that there's a foundation. And I just want to say that I am thankful for those teachers that decided to go in, even when they were under-resourced, even given of their own resources, to make it happen. I lost teachers in my district during the pandemic because they literally risked their lives in the midst of a pandemic to show up because they love those kids that much, because I can tell you, the pay is not there. Teachers aren't getting rich. Maybe professors, but not teachers. And so the fact is, I've talked to my school districts. They were able to take advantage of the extra money that was given to them, but guess what? They still had gaps that they needed to fill. And the reason that I brought up gun violence is, number one, it's a safety issue, but also as it relates to the mental health. Children nowadays know where they need to go in case somebody comes in. They're looking for the closet. That is no way for kids in America to live. So we need to make sure that we put kids first. Thank you so much, and with that, I will yield.